Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Deming with Blackboard Connect, here to host the Hurricane Communications Preparedness webinar. So the first part, I want to quickly go into the agenda of our webinar today. In a second here, I will be introducing Jeff Suggs as well and talk a little bit about the city of LaPorte. And after that, Jeff will take over, talk about hurricane communications, the basics, followed by a more in-depth contingency planning and best practices coverage. And then I will take over a little bit and talk about how Blackboard Connect can help you send messages quickly when you need to, and even mention our brand new hurricane playbook. And again, we'll bring it all back together for a Q&A session. So for now, let me introduce our today's speaker. Jeff Suggs is the Emergency Management Coordinator and IT Director for the city of LaPorte, Texas since 2004. He has been part of the largest evacuation in Texas history during Katrina and Rita. Not too long ago, Hurricane Ike was a direct hit to the region, giving real experience and expertise to Jeff. And he has been the incident commander for many chemical release events, as there is a large petrochemical industry in LaPorte. He's also been tasked with and executed a streamlined and resilient technology system for LaPorte to ensure continuity of operations for the city's government. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff. And first, Jeff, if you could tell us a little bit about LaPorte so people can get a better sense of your experience and what it is you exactly do at LaPorte.
Sure. And okay, thanks for everyone being on the call, and thanks to Zach and Blackboard for hosting these webinars. Some of the things we'll talk about are how we partnership today with some of our folks. If you look at LaPorte or you look at any kind of map, if you've ever been to this side of Texas, down on the western side of Galveston Bay, you really wouldn't know if you're in one city or another. I think it's the way it is largely across America today, where you have everyone annexing up to the borderline of everyone else. But LaPorte sits home to Galveston Bay and the Houston Ship Channel. There's about 48 chemical companies in our LEPC. There's about 300 total in the Houston-Harris County area. So we have a significant amount just here. The two ports, largest container ports, the second largest container ports nationally are right here in LaPorte. And just depends on how many ships are at sea or, that are coming in. It depends on, how many trucks we have that are going to those ports. So, there's a lot of man-made, if you will, hazards that we have to deal with daily, along with sitting on the water for hurricane issues and some of our evacuations we have to take care of. Large area that we have to deal with, and how do we take care of some of our business? Using Blackboard, I know that Zach had mentioned a couple of the hurricanes that we've had. In 2001, obviously, we were impacted this side of town, like most of the Houston region, with Tropical Storm Alice and the flooding. 2004, Florida got the lion's share of all the hurricanes with 4 or so. And then, of course, we had Rita, Katrina in 2005, and we actually sheltered about 2,800 people from Louisiana in 5 shelters here in LaPorte. Tropical Storm Erin wasn't mentioned. That was in 2007. A small storm impacted LaPorte and just the east side of Harris County, but actually was a disaster declaration just off of the LaPorte DSO that we sent in. So, small business loans and things like that opened up for folks because of some of the flooding that took place there. And like the slide shows, we did send 240,000 phone calls in September 2008. We put Blackboard in place in 2007. I had, one of those emergency managers that if you have one, you have two. I operate the IT that way too, as well. If I have one pathway, I have a second pathway just for redundancy and those type things. We put Blackboard in place in 2007, and it is our only system that we use. I've done my best to try to make it fail, and unfortunately, fortunately, I'm not able to do so. So that's a good thing for the Blackboard folks, because I do try to play devil's advocate all the time. So 240,000 phone calls sent in September 2008 for the hurricane. We can talk a little bit in a minute about how we did some of that. That's not the most phone calls that were sent by any city, but that is a significant amount. Let's take a look at the next slide and talk a little bit about some of the communications and what to communicate. Now, a lot of you may or may not have some of the same type issues that we may have with our hazardous materials issue, or the challenges that we come across every day. But, shelter-in-place orders and evacuations, we use that quite a bit. in the event that we have something that we have to ask the population to shelter in very quickly. Blackboard is just one of the many tools that we have of about 13 different ways to communicate, whether it be our sirens or roadway flashing signs or in-building alert beacons or however we're doing our messaging. This is just one of the tools that we use, and it helps get that information to that segment of population that wants it that way. There are some people that just want social media. We can send social media through Blackboard. There's some people that only want to look at the website. There's some people that want to, hear the sirens. There's some people that may not have a phone with them and they need some other kind of visual mechanism. So this is just one way that we have our tools to communicate shelter in place. Any kind of transportation changes, road closures, those type of things, status changes, those are some of the things that you always want to consider. We generally kind of forget that we have these tools sometimes. I get questions all the time like, gosh, could we have used this for this? And that's a big issue. We had a triathlon this last weekend in LaPorte. They didn't send anything out. Now, they posted things. They did some things, but did they make any phone calls? Not necessarily. Was traffic impacted? A little bit. Nothing major. It was a Sunday. So it's not that huge of a deal, but yet, someone said, gosh, we should have used this. And that's the thing is, always pay attention to what should we communicate. And, if you go back to look at your public information officers and those type of folks, they're always going to say, who knows what I know, who needs to know what I know, and how do I get it to them? Well, this is one way that you're going to get it to them, and this is the way that, we're using for a lot of our preferred communication. When to communicate, when you talk about weather events, in southeast Texas, sometimes we're a day late and dollar short with some of the storms that come through. Generally, we can't see things that pop up. The National Weather Service sees things that pop up, and we might have 15 to 20 seconds, and obviously we're not as fast as we like to be on some of those things. But, any kind of event that is significant that potentially could happen, those are always very important to communicate. If we know that we're going to have, impacts with severe weather, and if all 3 or 4, however many radio and news stations you're listening to, they're all lining up the same, then maybe it's a good idea to communicate some of those issues. You can always do your watches and warnings and those type things, but, one of the things you want to talk about, with your folks is, they're going to get information from others. They're going to get information, whether it be print media, whether it be television, whether it be internet media, their friends, their neighbors, whomever. You want to try to stay ahead of the curve on that. The best that you can to communicate, what is your jurisdiction going to do at what time? It's always better to be able to be proactive than reactive and get caught on your heels. And so, when to communicate early as you can communicate by putting out the correct information and kind of squashing some of the speculation demons that are out there. Templates, very important to have your templates pre-made. With Connect 5 and the product that they have today, you can develop those templates and have those templates and get to those templates very, very quickly. Anything from, prior to the storm, such as, evacuation, such as mandatory, voluntary, low-lying areas, lawn furniture, if you want to talk about heat, let's talk about pets, and let's talk about, your neighbors and some of those folks, making sure that there's cooling centers for those folks. Anything that you can think of for a template, put it out there, whether it be a traffic hazard, whether it be, a parade, anything that that's going to be something that happens every year, happens quite frequently, have a template built for that. It makes life a whole lot easier in the long run instead of having to try to build that on the fly. In emergency management, we've heard this statement many different times by many different people. The worst time to get smart is in the middle of the incident. That's the last time we really want to try to learn how to use something is right when we need to be using it. So, have those templates built and make sure that, you can make the connection, whether it be to, specific groups, to your Twitter accounts, your Facebook accounts, your email accounts, those type items ahead of time. Practice that thing as much as you can with your templates because you're always going to be ahead of the curve, when you do it that way. Our next slide, we talk about a little bit about some of the things that we've done with best practicing with our neighbors. LaPorte and Deer Park, the two cities are about the same size, in population and obviously the hazards. Both are Blackboard users, and it didn't make sense for me not to be able to communicate into their jurisdiction and them into mine. The police group, the EMS group, the fire group, they have certain districts and boundaries, and at any given time 911 goes to this city or that city, and they kind of run up to that line, with the exception of mutual aid agreements should they have those. In the emergency management world, there is no magical bubble. There's no magical dome or any kind of magical umbrella that stops things from traveling from one jurisdiction to another. If you have a vehicle accident in front of San Jacinto College, to the south it's in Pasadena, to the east is LaPorte, and to the north is Deer Park, and it's all on one street. And so basically all the police officers just kind of slow down and wait till the constable's office gets there to work the accident. And that was a joke, and hopefully you're laughing at this point. But anyway, what I'm trying to say there is no magical umbrella to stop things from happening when it comes to the emergency management realm. If it's a shelter-in-place chemical release, if it's a weather event, if it's a hurricane evacuation, or any of those type items, we should be able to communicate and assist our fellow neighbor should they fall down. If the internet systems or computer systems or something happens in the Deer Park area, but yet they need to communicate, we should be able to communicate for them and vice versa. And so we have that partnership. If you have groups that are beside you or near you that also have the same system that you have, get those interlocals together, get those contracts together, and partner together to where you have admin folks that can activate for that jurisdiction and you for them, just so that that you've got that redundancy and that backup. Very, very important to have those backup plans in place, again, prior to an incident, event, or disaster, because the worst time to try to get these things to happen is when everyone's trying to call the same client care representative at the same time and they're overwhelmed, because it's just not going to happen for you. Find out who else has your system that you have and knows how to operate that system, and practice with them and say, here's what we'd like to do, and here's our templates. Develop those things together. It's not going to hurt. The relationships are what makes the world go round, and you need to have those relationships prior to anything. Build your message templates together. Make sure that everyone knows why you're sending what you send. The other caveat to that is sign up for your neighbor's information. Many a times, during a hurricane, after the hurricane specifically, we may send information out at 6 o'clock and our residents really need that information, and they're getting that to their cell phone. There's no power, water, sewer may be limited, but yet they're still here in town, and so they yearn for that information. What's the city doing? What's open now? Is anything happening? And for me to know that to the south of us in Seabrook that the Waffle House is open, that's a good information. Maybe I can communicate that to some folks. Maybe some other folks need to sign up for my stuff when I'm telling people to separate their C&D, their construction demolition debris on the north side of the street, and the vegetation debris on the south side of the street, so that we can pick up the debris in a more professional and quicker manner and have the right contract firm pick up the right debris instead of having to sit out there and separate those things. Sign up for someone else's information. You never know what someone's going to say that you may have said, gosh, that was pretty good, I'm going to steal that. Again, you go back to the emergency management world, like we can't protect, like things happen all over the place and we have to try to protect our own but also help our neighbor. We also need to steal their ideas too. I can tell you many a times I've signed up for other jurisdictions in Galveston County and further to the west and east, and I've picked up on a few tips and we put them in place here. Why not? It's good information. I'm sure that others are doing the same. So consider doing that as well. Consider making sure that your neighbors have your information and you have theirs, so that you can get the same type thing and you're communicating the same things. The last thing that anyone wants to do is put in a mandatory curfew, and then the neighboring jurisdiction puts in a different hour mandatory curfew, and you have to travel through there. One person's doing a 5 in the evening to 5 in the morning, another one's doing 6 to 6, another 7 to 7. Work together on those things, and if you hear that, hey, they've already put in a mandatory curfew at this time, let's put ours in at the same time, or vice versa. Who do you call for help when you have a problem? If If you can't get a hold of your client care manager, which you should be able to, and you should know very well, what's the backup plan to that? What about someone in your own organization that may also be familiar? What about someone in a neighboring jurisdiction that may be familiar with the process and the system that can help you along? Those are very important things to have in place before hurricane season or any other kind of season that warrants you to use the system. And then, of course, your everyday use as well. Very important to have those things in place. And so those are some of the kind of the best practices that we're doing, internally here with LaPorte, so that we can make sure that, should we stub our toe and fall down a little bit, we have some kind of redundant backup plan for people to help us along the way. Let's see. I think our next slide, Zach, I think you wanted to kind of mention a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the mapping and some of the apps that you've got developed right now. And I will say this, I'm going to give a plug for the app. Years ago, emergency managers needed to live close. They needed to live real close, and it was very difficult for everyone to be out of town at one time and those type of things. With the way the world is today, we can operate our electronic technical systems here in LaPorte from an iPhone, an iPad, or any other way. We don't necessarily have to be on scene in the EOC to make things happen anymore. We have systems that we've developed and merged all of our tools and toys together in our toolbox so that we can actually do things in less than 3 minutes from a lot of different venues, and then take our time getting here while people are catching their bearings, but yet the processes have already gone out to happen. So consider those type things. The app is a very good app, but you need to know how to use it. Again, you've got to practice and practice and practice and test on this stuff. And if you're not using Blackboard on a daily basis but have it as a checkbox, you're not doing yourself or your citizens very much service there, because you really need to know how to use the system frontwards, backwards, so that we can make sure that we are up to speed on everything that we need to be doing here in LaPorte. Zach, if you want to take it and talk a little bit about the maps and those type things, I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Well, great. Thank you, Jeff. And you mentioned it a little bit as far as, creating those Connect 5 message templates, and I'm going to get into that here in a second.